That's a bar.
Shine. Nothing, either beautiful or pleasing, is acceptable in the least to the Grinches, and the Grinch was in fact green when confronted by the crisis they created. Remember, when the aristocracy catches cold, the peasants die of pneumonia.
Hey guys, how's it going? Brand new video today, and today the title of the video is Mother Nature Doesn't Need You to Fight for Her. Shogba, mind your business. This video comes from a special place in my heart, and I felt compelled to make this video because I do not agree with a lot of the things I hear when it comes to climate change and global warming and the steps people are taking to combat climate change. As the title will suggest, I don't think we should be fighting other people on behalf of the climate. The climate is not so easily broken that we have to put people into abject poverty to fix it. And some of you may be like, wait, Ty, what are you talking about? Who's being put in poverty over climate change? You know, relax. I'm going to go over all of that in this video. But before that, first of all, you're going to be getting a lot of background noise because I'm in the basement and my family is upstairs. The noise and everything. But let's talk. Let's have a conversation. Stick with me here. I'm going to. I actually wrote a script this time. Yes, I wrote a script of things I want to talk about because this is important and I don't want to lose track of certain points I want to make. So I'm going to start off with the intro I wrote, and it's a bit dramatic, but welcome to the channel. Like and subscribe. Okay. When a ship is violently rocked back and forth on the perilous seas, when the storm backs out its orders to the oceans, and the waves respond with enthusiasm, when the lightning races across the sky to commune with the thunder, and the ship is lost in the vigor of activities of these elemental titans, the ship is tossed. The ship is tossed to and fro, absolutely powerless against the titanic movements that surround it. It is bashed, bruised, and destroyed, never once being noticed by the elements as they run busily from one errand to another, completely oblivious to the men lost beneath its magnificent blue waves. Nature is not brutal. Nature is not vindictive. Nature is just doing its own thing. It is up to us as humans to learn how to cope and how to survive in nature. Mother Nature is a strong, independent woman who don't need no man. Wise words from Omoti, the handsome fella over there. You should check out the video he made recently. Mother Nature is a strong, independent woman who don't need no man. She's been running our faith for ages, and somehow, against all odds, we have managed to hang on to her weave. For as far back as we can look, man has struggled to survive in nature. The old words ring true. Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests. Pause. But the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. What? Let's take that back. Put some respect on the old words. The old words ring true. Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests. But the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. What's to live by? So how come there seems to be now such a large, or rather a strong movement fighting other people on behalf of nature? The more I listen to the arguments for what I would describe as actions against humanity on behalf of Mother Nature, the more I am convinced that we have entered into yet another pocket dimension where compassion and justice have become a dangerous weapon that we seem determined to destroy each other with. How is it that we are so eager to sacrifice people to appease nature? Is this what it means to be enlightened? Have we gotten so enlightened that we have now run back to the altars of the ruthless old gods who could only be appeased by our blood and suffering? In this video, I will attempt to the best of my ability to make a case for why we need to chill on fighting for nature, particularly fighting for nature to the detriment of other people. Climate change is a problem you can only afford to think about when you are not starving. It is when your stomach is full that you can then have the luxury of checking on how the planet is feeling. It really rubs me off the wrong way when someone gets in a private jet, travels to a different country to attend a summit on carbon emissions. There's something just so ignorant and hypocritical about it's like scolding somebody for not driving a Tesla when they can barely afford to put gas in the car that they already have. Let's backtrack a little bit. Let's take it back home to Nigeria. Um, in Nigeria, people still use coal and firewood to cook. This is not because gas cookers and electric cookers don't exist. Nope. It's because it's expensive. Not everybody can afford to buy gas and to cook with an electric cooker in a lot of African countries. Especially, I'm going to talk about Nigeria because that's where I grew up. A lot of homes still rely on kerosene stoves to prepare their meals. The price of gas is too high, and electricity supply is unavailable or unreliable at best. The only other option is to use generators that run on petrol. So now tell me, what do you think will happen to people who can barely afford petrol if you make petrol unavailable? Would they suddenly be able to afford cleaner sources of energy as though the problem was that they hadn't thought about it before? Or would they be forced to resort to either even more crude sources of energy like firewood, coal, and kerosene, which people use, by the way, or they starve to death in the corners of the shiny green new streets, wasting away in the sustainable society they can no longer afford to partake in? Hypothetically speaking, say we want to fix up the project, the ghettos, the lungus, you know what I'm saying? Say we wanted to fix it up, make it a better place, make it a better environment. Sounds like a good cause to strive for. So we go there, we demolish all the slums, the crack houses, uncompleted buildings, face me, I slap you. We demolish everything, we clean the whole place out. Then we build new state-of-the-art buildings, better roads, better infrastructures. We build good schools, malls, and other incredible attractions, Mission accomplished, right? So what happens to the people who used to live there? Would they all suddenly become part of this new environment, or would they become worse off than they were? They would lose even the little they had. The slums were ugly, but it is still better than being absolutely homeless. Face me, I slap you is still a better option than under the bridge. For my international audience, face me, I slap you is it's kind of like there's some apartment complex, but it's very small and your rooms actually like face each other, and you can hear what you're. It's exactly like an apartment complex, basically, yeah. But if somebody is living in a rundown apartment, like condominium complex like that, it is still better to be in a rundown, roach-infested place than to be absolutely homeless. These freshly minted victims of the new world cannot afford the new schools. They cannot afford the state-of-the-art homes that have replaced what was substandard, but what was all they had to call home. They can't afford the electric cars on the new streets, and the only options they would have left would be to live under the magnificent new bridges. Either that, or they take even more drastic and desperate measures, as desperate men are apt to do. Wouldn't it be better if the standard of the slums and ghettos improve as a result of its occupants being able to afford better? When food is cheaper and power is more accessible and easily affordable, they will be much more able to clean up the slums in increments as things get better for them. The lower the levels of poverty that the people are subjected to, the more they can then afford to pay attention to their environment and improving it. But that's assuming the goal is to improve the standard of living of people. But that is not the goal. A lot of times when people talk about climate change, it's about improving the environment. The people be damned. If your objective is to make the slums as clean as possible, to hell with whoever used to live there. Whatever happens to them, it's their lot in life. Then it makes sense to just go there, clear everything out, and make things like so shiny and brand new. But people who used to be there can no longer afford it, and that's what is going on right now, especially in a lot of African countries. I recently came across an article aimed at delivering the good news to Nigerians, that the French Development Agency, Agence Française de Développement (AFD), has stated that they will invest $70 million into renewable energy projects in Nigeria. And I have to ask, why do you think there is an energy crisis in Nigeria? Nigeria is currently Africa's third largest oil producing country. Yet the prices of gas is so expensive in Nigeria. Nigeria distributes energy via dams and crude oil supply to other countries, and those countries have stable electricity supply, but Nigeria cannot boast of the same. So it's the problem that we don't have the infrastructures, or we don't have the funds, or that the funds that we have are being mismanaged. I would argue that our biggest problem in Nigeria is management and corruption, corruptive administration, let's put it that way. So I was perplexed at why the French, America, different other countries are investing so much in third world countries and giving them so much money to put in renewable energy that the people living in the country cannot even afford. And then I came across this article. So for the rest of this video, after I play this clip, the rest of the video, I'm going to be reacting to a video by Jordan Peterson. He is quite a controversial character. I'll put it that way. People either really hate him or really love him. But I'm reacting to this video because the things he says rings true to me. I listen to what he said and I'm like, dang, I actually noticed that too. Wait a minute, he's spitting. So I'm going to play a clip first, and then we'll go into the reaction portion of this video. It's going to be a long one. If you have like your you're comfortable, have a drink beside you. I got my coffee right here. So hey, let's go to the clip. There we go. Just trying to detangle my headphones so I can do this. Hey guys. Okay. Struggle is real. You guys could skip this part when the reaction starts, by the way. You don't have to watch me struggle with this. A second. Aha! Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's go.
I wrote about this recently. People can see it at energytalkingpoints.com, which is where I post my new stuff. But there's the idea that we should feel guilty for ruining the world, and I believe we've made the world better for everyone, including the poor. But the other element that is obviously wrong is what is happening is we are paying people off, usually dictators off, to not use fossil fuels. So we are paying them to deprive people of the crucial freedom to get prosperity. And that is just.
Did you guys hear that? Does that not sound like what I just read in the article? Well, the AFD investing $70 million into renewable energy projects in Nigeria. PHCN, the organization responsible for delivering electricity, the ever source of Nigeria, doesn't have stable electricity to boast of. Like this might be like mind-boggling to people who have only lived in like developed countries like America, but these lights that are on in Nigeria isn't always on. Most people, if your lights are going to be on, you're going to have like a generator that looks like this. You're going to have that, and the one that is like provided that you're like you pay your bill for like your energy bill for Eversource, um that is not guaranteed. It goes off anytime. See, you guys have like blackout warnings. It's going to be a blackout. It's permanently a blackout. Occasionally you have power, but the norm is a blackout. That's what we deal with in Nigeria. And then we are hearing of this investment into renewable energy when we can barely afford both the petroleum and the ones we provide with our dams and everything, due to mismanagement, by the way, due to bad leadership, not due to lack of funds or infrastructure, because every weekend somebody is stealing billions of naira, billions of dollars in Nigeria every weekend. So let me run this back. Let me hear him say that again. This is quite
feel guilty for ruining the world. And I believe we've made the world better for everyone, including paying people off, usually dictators off, to not use fossil fuels. So we are paying them to deprive people of the crucial freedom to get prosperity. And that is just totally shameful. And that is absolutely interfering in the lives of the world's poorest people.
Right. So with our so-called climate reparations that are going to be devoted to the governments of third world countries primarily, we're going to be propping up frequently brutal quasi-dictatorships and bribing them to keep their populations poor.
Yes.
So when I first had this thing, I was perplexed because I was like, why Nigeria of all countries? Of all countries in Africa where renewable energy can be invested in to a like reasonable success rate estimate. Like, why Nigeria of all countries? Nigeria's infrastructures are notoriously bad. Our entertainment industry, is popping off right now, but our infrastructures are whack. So why Nigeria? And when I hear this thing about giving it to primarily countries with quasi dictatorship, it's like Nigeria kind of fits that bill. We do have some. We don't have leaders. We have some rulers, that we have to contend with, and our interest is not foremost on their minds. So it sounds like they are being paid $70 million to make us poorer, which they will gladly do if history is anything to go by. Let's continue.
So that we don't save the planet. That's our poor.
Wait.
So that we dictatorships and
Bars.
we're going to be propping up frequently brutal quasi-dictatorships and bribing them to keep their populations poor.
Yes.
So that we don't save the planet.
Now, what you said about like so that we don't save the planet is like the money is invested into renewable energy to save the planet. But the actions aren't actually geared towards saving the planet as much as they are geared towards damaging, hurting the rich and crushing the poor, so to speak. So not really saving the planet, because I'll put the links in the description, but there are several ways to like actually improve our climate, and the climate is actually doing really good now, much more better than it was estimated. We're supposed to be in a crisis by the 2000, then later by the 2020s, and we ain't extinct yet, and we're actually doing inexplicably well. So let's continue.
That's our plan.
That is the plan. I mean, again, it's not a movement that actually has any kind of goal and strategy long term. It's really just hostility toward any impact. And at the moment, it's CO2 emissions. So anything that has CO2 emissions, you hate. But observe, look, there's no enthusiasm for nuclear, right? Which you would expect them to love because it doesn't emit CO2. There's hatred for nuclear. There's hatred for hydro. And there's hatred for mining, which is necessary for solar and wind, which require way more mined materials than anything else. So it's really an anti-impact movement that's just hostile to any human impact and just nihilistically and randomly pursues that with no strategy and no thinking about the future. And this mentality is leading the world. This is what I call our knowledge system. It is blindly pursuing this destructive anti-human path with no strategy.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll stop that portion of the video there. But from what we saw, you guys can see what I'm saying about. It's almost like we've become so enlightened that we've gone back to the days of sacrificing people to the gods to appease them. But now the gods are Mother Nature, and the poor people should be sacrificed at the altars so that Mother Nature can have us back in our good graces. I would say Mother Nature is not angry at us. We are a part of nature. We just have to struggle. We have to struggle, and we have to come up with new ways to survive so that we don't die, because death is a thing that humans go through. So I'm going to go into a different video. This video, I'll put the link in the description also. If you guys are nerds like me, I would like watching prolonged discourse on societal or existential issues. I will hook you guys up. The link will be in the description, but the one we're going to be reacting with is not 1 hour and 36 minutes 47 seconds long. This one is going to be about 24 minutes. So let's go to that one now. One second. I just want to make sure that the video I recorded actually has sound if I go to the next video, so I don't have issues in editing. Okay guys, we good. The sound video is working fine, so let's go to the next video, and we're gonna start with this one. First of all, I'd like you guys to pick the fits. Man's looking dapper. You just it's about to spit some facts. But let's start.
This winter, tens of millions of British citizens, including children, will be tipped or dumped into energy poverty severe enough to risk permanent damage to their health. Cold, damp houses provide the perfect breeding ground for mold that not only causes respiratory distress, but renders houses essentially unlivable once established. One left-leaning newspaper ran the story outlining the danger, but without a word about why this crisis has emerged. Because the woke moralizers of the environmental movement helped to create it. The narcissists of compassion, callow self-aggrandizement.
I watched this video before, by the way, but I kind of missed that line. I need to hear that again. First of all, starvation and poverty will not save the planet. Fact.
The narcissists of compassion,
The narcissists of compassion.
callow, self-aggrandizing, incompetent politicians, their celebrity lackeys, Machiavellian journalists, have insisted ever more loudly over the last 5 decades that no cost was and is too great for others to bear.
No cost is too great for others to bear. Okay, Lord Farquaad.
In the pursuit of blind
Not him being Lord Farquaad. I mean, the people are acting like Lord Farquaad. Do you guys remember the line I'm talking about? You're a real one.
service to the planet. It is irreliant and is too great for others to bear in the pursuit of blind service to the planet. It is irresistibly tempting at the moment for those on that bandwagon to single out and demonize Vladimir Putin for Europe's energy woes, but his current machinations were utterly enabled by the green ideologues. Anyone with eyes could see a decade ago that the idiot insistence that Europe make itself reliant on Russia for its energy security made the current situation inevitable. Remember when President Donald Trump, populist menace numero uno, was mocked and derided by the intellectual and political elite in Europe and North America for trumpeting precisely that warning? Well, now the chickens have truly come home to roost, but very little has yet been learned in consequence. Virtue signaling utopians committed to globalization claim we are destroying the planet with cheap energy. But are they truly and deeply committed to the environmental sustainability so loudly and insistently demanded? Or are they merely hell-bent in the prototypically Marxist manner in taking revenge on capitalism? It appears to be the latter. Why otherwise would the mavens of the environmental movement oppose nuclear power, despite its optimal carbon footprint? Why would they demonize the exceptionally clean natural gas, whose fracking-enabled production has allowed the US to dramatically cut the very carbon output that is so hypothetically undesirable? Utility bills have soared in the UK, the home of the Industrial Revolution that lifted the world out of poverty. Now, up to half of small businesses in Britain face the risk of bankruptcy and closure. The government
That's another reason why, a lot of businesses can't even function in Nigeria because no energy. Making things more expensive won't help.
has had to announce a ruinously expensive energy price guarantee to mitigate the worst effects of this disaster, the rush to renewables. The mentality among the eco-extremists is as follows. If we have to doom the poor to destroy the system that made the rich, so be it. You just can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. Here are some facts to remember while we so madly and ineffectively rush to renewables. The International Energy Agency recently indicated that 2 decades of intense support for such undertakings has hiked the proportion of energy provided by such means from 13 to 14% to an utterly underwhelming 15.7%. If all governments deliver on their current climate policies, the world will derive no more than 28% of its energy that way by 2050, and 100% by 2207. Not
So this is why I feel like this whole climate change drama going on is less about improving the standard of living of people or even of improving the environment. It's just, I don't know, it's in a way, I can't shake the feeling like it's in a way like sacrificing people, like human sacrifice of another form again. but this time it's coming in compassion, it's for the greater good, but is not, you're not going to sacrifice yourself, of course. You're going to sacrifice other people who are already having a rough go at it at that. And the sacrifice isn't making such tremendous difference. So if everything goes according to plan, just 28% is 28%. And 100% by 22 watts.
2030 or 2035, but 200 years later. Does anyone on the liberal left accept such projections? Or are they a mere fabrication of the conspiratorial right-wing conservative imagination?
Talk to me.
How about the Biden administration? Biden's experts, no doubt motivated to be as optimistic as possible, project that a mere 27% of the energy produced by 2050 will be carbon dioxide free, and that full CO2 eradication cannot possibly occur until 2242. 2242, an even more dismal guesstimation, if you regard such realities as dismal, than that put forth by the International Energy Agency. But the tyrannical and emergency justified panicked crunch is not just happening in the UK. In Spain, officials now dictate that commercial properties must not be heated above 17 degrees Celsius or cooled below 27 degrees Celsius upon pain of law. In Switzerland, similar...
To my people back home, the reason why they have a lot of the issues they have with regards to power is more geared towards like heating, is because these are very cold regions. We don't have those problems, but we do have problems of power, electricity power, the ability to do business, to thrive, to have electricity in your houses, so you're not just exposed to the elements. That's our big issue, and it is a big issue.
Punishments are being considered as part of a proposed 4-step plan for dealing with a gas shortage, which, quote, cannot be ruled out this winter given the geopolitical situation. The citizens of Germany, likewise, are now in phase 2 of a 3-stage emergency plan following a reduction in gas flows from Russia, its main supplier. The plan involves bringing coal-fired plants onto the market, according to German Minister Robert Habeck, despite them being, quote, simply poison for the climate, and the potential of gas rationing for industrial companies, so that supplies to homes and schools, etc., are not disrupted. The extended plan involves curtailing the Christmas lighting that constitutes part of the celebration in the midst of the winter darkness in many locations where they generally shine.
I'm sure he's going to make the points later on in the video, but this is what I'm saying. If people are relying on petrol, crude oil, and you take that away and replace it with renewable energy that people don't have access to or can't afford, the only thing that's going to happen is they will revert to even more like harmful to the planet's sources of energy, like coal. These are developed countries going back to coal and putting restrictions on Christmas lightings and heating in homes and schools just so they can have enough energy, because they no longer have as much access to the power as they used to. So if this is going on in developed countries, guys, back home, I think we are screwed. We are screwed. Yes.
Nothing, either beautiful or pleasing, is acceptable in the least to the Grinches, and the Grinch was in fact green when confronted by the crisis.
Don DeMarco, bang bang. That's a bar.
Shine. Nothing, either beautiful or pleasing, is acceptable in the least to the Grinches, and the Grinch was in fact green when confronted by the crisis they created. Remember, when the aristocracy catches cold, the peasants die of pneumonia.
This man is yo bars. Damn. Oh, that's I need. I just want to hear, guys. This is gonna be a very long video, so if you watch this video to the end, shout outs to you. Put avatar states in the comment section. But yeah, thanks for bearing with me, but I need to hear that again.
If such extreme measures have become necessary, in fact, green constitutes part of the celebration in the midst of the winter darkness in many locations where they generally shine. Nothing, either beautiful or pleasing, is acceptable in the least to the Grinches, and the Grinch was in fact green when confronted by the crisis they created. Remember, when the aristocracy catches cold, the peasants die of pneumonia. If such extreme measures have become necessary in the richest countries, what in God's name is going to happen in the poorer ones? When the shortages strike, the poor will inevitably and necessarily turn to less green resources. Many, even in Germany, are already stockpiling firewood and coal for the winter, leading to acute shortages. How is incentivizing people to cut down and burn trees and use coal in their fireplaces going to help reduce the dreaded atmospheric carbon load? The actual poor versus the hypothetical poor. Perhaps we'll be able to comfort ourselves here in the West with the thought that the food we take for granted will still be available at our tables. But wait, the crops that nourish our populations cannot be grown without fertilizer, loathed by green folk, and more specifically, without ammonia. And what, pray tell, is ammonia derived from? Could it be natural gas? And how
the pray tell was a bit bougie, but
how many people are dependent for their daily bread on the industrial generation and consequent wide availability of ammonia? Only 3 or 4 billion. What happens to the continuous production plants responsible for making ammonia if the natural gas supplies are halted, even momentarily? They destroy themselves, as they were not designed for such an unlikely event, and they cannot be restarted. The World Bank itself has recently indicated that 222 million people are already experiencing the threat of starvation, described oh so nicely as food insecurity. The communists managed to kill 100 million in the last century with their utopian delusions. We've barely begun to implement the Save the Planet nightmare, and we've already placed twice that number at risk. We are told an emergency confronts us, the climate crisis. The solution? The masses will have to tighten their belts to forestall an even worse future catastrophe.
That's us, by the
The
way.
elite academics, think tanks, and corporate consultants, and the politicians who subsidize their intellectual pretensions will not be particularly affected by such tightening, privileged as they are. But the actual poor? To such an elite,
us.
they must be sacrificed now to save tomorrow's hypothetical poor. And 222 million people is no doubt an underestimate. As the food insecurity gets more severe, more countries will place restrictions.
Food insecurities is such a nice way of saying mass starvation. I'll probably put up like a picture over here of the stats on how many people in Nigeria are in multi-dimensional poverty. I'm not making those words up. Those are the actual words used to describe it. Multi-dimensional poverty.
Restrictions on food exports. That will harm the international supply lines we all depend on. Then, when the consequences of that manifest themselves, increasingly desperate politicians will begin to nationalize and centralize food distribution, as the French and Germans have already done on the energy front, and cut their farmers off at the knees, who will in turn stop growing food, not out of spite, but because of dire economic impossibility. then we will have engendered the kind of feedback loop that can really spiral out of control. It will be poor people who die first, at least. But as we have all been taught by the malevolent eco-moralizers, the planet has too many people on it anyway.
Man, he's spitting. That's another issue I want to talk about in a different video about overpopulation, and we're talking about like we have too many people on the planet. I would say right now we don't, but I will talk about it more in a separate video.
Think about this while you shiver all too soon in your cold, damp, and increasingly expensive and now substandard lodgings. You and your family may well have been deemed an expendable excess.
We certainly have.
Food for thought.
We're expendable as heck.
This is simply not acceptable. If you dare to claim the
Wait, did you say food for bars?
moral high ground while serving the cause of starvation, then, by my reckoning, you've placed yourself firmly in the enemy camp, and you richly deserve whatever is coming your way. In the psychological and educational arenas, too, we demoralize young people, feeding them a constant diet of concretized apocalypse, focusing particularly on tempering or even obliviating the laudable ambition of boys, hectoring them into believing that their virtue is nothing but the force that oppresses the innocent and despoils the virginal planet.
This also is a topic I want to talk about in a separate video, but as much hate as this man gets, he does speak facts, I would say. Because when he says some things and I like, dang, I've actually seen that to be true. Like I've observed that to be the case. Again, in the separate video I'll address this properly, but I have seen, especially for like white young men, it's rough out here for you guys. It's rough.
And if that doesn't work, and it does, then there's always the castration awaiting the gender dysphoric. And you oppose such initiatives at substantial personal risk. But we can reassure ourselves with the fact that a beneficent government is going to set up warm spots in public libraries and museums this winter so that
Sounds
freezing,
dystopian.
starving old people can huddle together to keep warm while their grandchildren cough up their lungs in their frigid, damp, and moldy flats. In such circumstances, in the face of such mandatory privations and manipulations, it's obvious that the last thing our tyrannical, idiot, panicked, virtue-signaling governments should be doing is directing their demented attention toward regulating what people serve at their tables. But because meat has also been deemed yet something else that is destroying the planet.
Oh, ads. But you guys are surprised by that. That's true. Meat is also bad for the planet. So is, cow farting is also bad for the planet. So yeah, you guys should all stop eating meat, and your cows should really stop farting.
Eve to me is basically freedom. It's a giant open universe where you can do.
The woke narcissists of compassion are already insisting that people eat less of it. Plants and bugs for you and your children, peasants. And the sooner you get accustomed to it, or else,
Slightly
the
offended.
better. Let's turn our attention to the claim that animal husbandry and the meat it produces cheaply enough for everyone to afford is unsustainable. For a moment, because we haven't yet dispensed with enough moralizing and authoritarian stupidity. Remember what happened the last time that government agencies applied their tender mercy to determining what the people they serve should consume? We were offered the much vaunted food pyramid, telling us to eat 6 to 11 servings of grains and carbohydrates a day, with protein and fat at the pin.
This is going to be a really long video, guys. I really I really hope you guys watch it to the end, but understandable if you're not into this nerd stuff. But yeah, the food, there's a lot of messed up stuff that goes on in lobbying and marketing for what we're supposed to eat. Suffice it to say that most institutions that rely on, will probably are probably not is not. I wouldn't put it past them to screw us over.
Pinnacle, something to be indulged in with comparative rarity, if indeed necessary at all. That all turned out to be wrong, and not just a little wrong, but so wrong that it might as well have been not just wrong, but a veritable anti-truth, something as wrong as it could possibly get. The food pyramid was brought into being not least by the US Department of Agriculture, that is, by marketers, not scientists or nutritionists, with no shortage whatsoever of lobby efforts by those whose products ended up being promoted. The dietary recommendation to prioritize carbohydrates produced a veritable epidemic of obesity and diabetes, resulting in what has been deemed by reliable researchers as one of the worst public health disasters of all time, dooming almost the entire Western population to a lifetime of catastrophic chronic health problems. 42% of Americans are obese. Another almost equally large percentage are overweight. At least a third are in the early or later stages of diabetes, which is an exceptionally serious disease. $1.7 trillion is spent annually on chronic illness in the US. And the rise in such illness and cost is directly associated with the beginning of the godforsaken top-down dietary guidelines that set us all on a carbohydrate-heavy dietary pathway. There have been, in addition, dozens of studies debunking the claim that red meat causes disease. The PURE study, P-U-R-E, published in the journal Lancet in 2017, analyzing 140,000 individuals from 18 countries, revealed that, quote, higher carbohydrate intake, not meat and fat, note, was associated with an increased risk of total mortality, and that, quote, higher saturated fat intake was associated with lower risk of stroke. Lower. That is exactly the opposite of what we have been told by the beneficial centralizing agents who task themselves with determining what we, as sovereign and responsible individuals, should put in our mouths. So the health benefits of a pure vegetarian and vegan diet are dubious at best. But what of the argument that animal husbandry is killing the planet?
Okay,
Well,
talk to me about that.
the American Environmental Protection Agency estimates that all farming produces only 11% of greenhouse gases in the US. Transportation produces 27%. Livestock accounts for 3%. And plant-based agriculture? 5%. According to the National Academy of Sciences, if we eradicated all animal-based agriculture, we'd reduce greenhouse gases by a mere 2.6%. And it is no simple matter, by the way, and perhaps impossible, to manage a diet that is sustainable in the medium to long term by merely dining on plants. Chew on that.
Bars.
Ex hodos, the pathway forward. What might we do instead if we chose to be genuinely wise, instead of inflicting want and privation upon the world's poor, while failing utterly and disastrously to save the planet? We could begin by assuming here in the West that all those frightened into paralysis and enticed into tyranny by their apprehension of the pending apocalypse have bitten off more than they can properly chew, have taken on a dragon much more fire-breathing and dire than they are heroic, have failed entirely to contend with the moral hazard that comes in assuming that the faddish emergency of their overheated imaginations entitles them to the use of power and compulsion. If your apprehension of the looming catastrophe, whatever its form, has made you into a terrified authoritarian, willing to frighten and compel to get your way, you are simply not the right leader for the times. As the unconscious manifestations of your own nervous system, telling you that you are just too small for the job at hand, are clearly indicating, even to you. We could begin by dropping our appalling attitude of moral superiority toward the developing world. We could admit instead that the rest of the planet's inhabitants have the right and the responsibility to move toward the abundant material life that we have enjoyed despite ourselves.
That's to us in Nigeria, by the way. We have the right and the responsibility to build a better life for ourselves.
For the last century, and which has been so entirely dependent on industrial activity and fossil fuel usage. We could work diligently and with purpose to drive energy and food prices down to the lowest level possible so that we can ease the burden on the poor and open up the horizons of possibility so that they become concerned, as they inevitably and properly will, with long-term sustainability, instead of acting desperately and destructively in pursuit of their next meal. We could concentrate on an intelligent plan of stewardship instead of anti-human environmentalism, along the lines of the plans outlined by multifaceted and diligent experts such as Dr. Bjorn Lomborg, who pointed out years ago that we have a multitude of crises facing us, and not just one, the hypothetically apocalyptic danger of carbon, and that we could spend the money we are wasting killing poor people in a much more intelligent and judicious manner, devoting some resources, for example, to ensuring a stable food supply to poor children in the developing world, treating malaria, something we can do and cheaply, and delivering fresh water where it is truly needed. We could as well work out the details of a truly sustainable agriculture with the most expert farmers to improve the quality of our soil and air and provide everyone with enough high-quality food, which will most definitely involve animal-based agriculture. We could bring a halt to the presumption that the state should extend itself by dint of its hypothetical moral superiority to the governance of how we heat our houses and feed and provision our own families. We could, finally, delegate authority to the most local possible of levels, following the principle of subsidiarity.
Yeah, no. Odifa fún wa ní Naija. Giving authority even to the lower levels of administration. True federalism.
And produce a hierarchy of responsibility that extends necessary purpose to everyone individually at the family and community and state level, and that serves as a necessary bulwark against the blind and Luciferian, prideful, intellect-based, top-down tyrannies of emergency and compulsion that will otherwise necessarily reign. We could work out our concerns with sustainability through consensus and in the spirit of voluntary association and free play, instead of relying on top-down edicts justified in principle by our misplaced existential terror and carrying with them the moral hazard of the accrual of unjustified and dangerous centralized authority. We could distribute to everyone their requisite responsibility as sovereign actors and could bring them on board with the power of a common vision, one of life more abundant, enough high-quality food for everyone, enough energy so that slavery becomes a thing of the past, enough purpose so that nihilism and decadence no longer beckon, enough reciprocity so that we live in true peace, the generous provision of education and opportunity to everyone in the world, the conviction, to say it again, that policy based on compulsion is misguided and counterproductive. We could thereby have our cake and eat it too, and so could everyone else. And we could work toward that in a mutual spirit of productive generosity and fair play in competition and cooperation. Or we could let the world go to hell in a handbasket, blame that disintegration on the very enemies we specified as causal in the first place, those damned capitalists, and fail to clean up our own souls as we persecute the imaginary wrongdoers responsible for the destruction of our planet, identifying the real danger. As the psychologist Carl Jung said in the aftermath of the Nazi atrocities and the use of nuclear weapons, quote, "It is becoming more and more obvious that it is not starvation, not microbes, not cancer, but man himself who is mankind's greatest danger. For the simple reason that there is no adequate protection against psychic epidemics, which are infinitely more devastating than the worst of natural catastrophes. That great man knew that technological man had a stark choice in front of him, to become as ethical as he had become powerful, and that a real hell awaited if we refused the challenge. The rate of change is accelerating. Our ability to do almost everything is doubling faster and faster. As our ability to communicate and to compute accelerates, the consequence of our inner disunity and insufficiency become ever more serious. As we become individually more powerful, in other words, we must take on more responsibility, or else. If we fail to rectify our personal pathologies of pride, envy, and the willingness to lie, we will find ourselves mired in conflict with the world, both natural and social, and in precise proportion to our refusal to check the devil within. So, we have a stark choice in front of us. We can reorient ourselves to the cause of truth, or we can act out the conflict, imposing our self-serving instrumental delusions on the world, bringing about in that manner an external apocalypse that will result in precisely the same judgment. And so, in conclusion, it's time for all of us, but especially the self-righteous moralizers, to get our individual acts together, to take on some real moral responsibility, instead of falsely broadcasting unearned virtue far and wide, and so cheaply and carelessly.
Oh. Wow. So this has been quite the long video. I truly have nothing else I would like to add to that, but that was that was a lot to take in. Again, I'll put some links in the description if you guys want to do your own research into the environmental issues. But my point in this whole video, I guess, would be that let's not be too eager to sacrifice other people for the planet. Let's clean up our own houses first. Remove the speck in your eye before you start pointing at the planks in somebody else's eye. Anyway, thanks for watching. This has been a great video today. Like and subscribe, share the video, and I'll see you guys next time on a more cheerful video, hopefully. So, deuces.